Good morning, members. We do have quorum and we're going to bring the session to order. I'd like to welcome all members to the 61st meeting of the Committee for Communities. And we'll just go through a few quick housekeeping rules to start off with. Can I remind anyone in the public gallery that mobile phones must be turned off? Mobile tablet devices can, however, be used through a Wi-Fi connection, and all devices should be muted. Password details are available in the gallery for anyone wanting to connect to the Assembly's Wi-Fi network. No recordings or photographs are to be taken. May I also remind members about the protocols regarding the use of electronic devices. Switch all mobile devices to airplane mode and activate Wi-Fi connection. Please also use tablet devices discreetly and in a way which does not interfere with proceedings, and be aware of the cameras when using the tablet device. I'd also like to remind you once again about the sensitivity of the microphones. And for any members joining via Zoom, can I ask that you be mindful of whether the camera on your device is able to pick up any other people who may not wish to be seen, or if you wish to blur your background, please. And we'll move on to the first item on the agenda, and that's declaration of interests. And I would remind members of your responsibility to declare any interest in any of the items under discussion today. I'd just like to declare that I'm also a member of the Committee for Infrastructure. But does any other member have any interest to declare in relation to today's agenda items?
Member of GA and Conor Nagalia and Chairman of Nice Conley Charity.
Morris.
Football. Do you want to hear it all?
We might have them from before, do we, Emer? Or do you want to?
Do you have a list of all your football interests? Yep.
Okay. Is that everybody? Okay, agenda item 2 is apologies. Clerk, do we have any apologies for today?
Yes, we have Pam Cameron and Chair Con Gildernew for the first part of the meeting. Hopes to join later in the meeting via Zoom.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so agenda item 3 is chairperson's business. And members, as you are aware, our last committee meeting on the 23rd of October, following our regular meeting, the committee held an event for the sign language bill with members of the deaf-blind community. I understand it was a very informative and eye-opening event which focused on the unique everyday challenges faced by deaf-blind members of our community. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank both Deaf-Blind UK and Sense for their attendance at the event. I unfortunately wasn't able to make that event, so I'm not sure if any other members here wish to kind of speak to their experience of it.
Yeah, I thought it was really powerful, to be honest. I think it opened my eyes even to the challenges within this building.
Yes.
Things that I don't think had necessarily presented themselves before. So I think it was really useful for us as we're deliberating this bill, but also in terms of the practicalities of inviting guests into this building and the level of accessibility there actually is in Parliament buildings. And I think that was something that the clerk and I had spoken about, just some of those challenges, and it might be worthwhile even passing some of that feedback. I'm not sure if it's already been passed back to
Commission.
Yeah.
Assembly Commission, yeah.
I think even from the previous event, remember, with young people coming in, we'd realised there was different challenges as well, maybe we hadn't noticed before too. So yeah, that's worthwhile. I think we have written off to the Commission.
We have written to the Commission, yeah.
All right, thank you.
And then thanks again to the clerk staff for all the massive amount of work that would have went into putting that on.
Well, yeah, thank you. If there are no other items for chairperson's business, we'll move on to draft minutes of the last meeting of the 23rd of October. So draft minutes are on page 7. Do members have any comments or want to make any changes to the minutes, or are you happy to agree to them?
Agree?
Happy to agree, okay, thank you. All right, we'll move on to matters arising then. So there is a summary table there of matters arising at page 21, and as usual we'll take them in chunks here. So we'll work from items 5.2 to 5.7 first of all, and if I can just highlight item 5.7, that's page 58 of the pack, and it's in relation to benefit fraud and error task and finish group and the briefing that the committee had previously requested. So if you recall, we reviewed an item at the last meeting recommending that the committee receive and the briefing in closed session. So following that meeting, the department has sent further information, and that's attached to page 58 there. This sets out the rationale for the briefing being in closed session. So can I ask members for their views? Are you content that we take this briefing in closed session?
I'd be happy.
Yeah. Yep.
Deputy Chair, whatever you're. I'd be happy for closed session.
Okay.
Can, you know.
No, that's fine. Okay. Okay, Kelly. So we're happy enough with that. Is there anything else anyone wants to raise between points 5.2 and 5.7? Go on ahead, Shan.
Certain. So in 5.2 and I think it is 5.2, 5.3, 5.4 and 5.5, just around the housing decarbonisation building regulations. It does seem there's a lack of synchronisation between Department of Finance, Building Regulations Uplift and the Department for Communities, Retrofit and Housing energy programmes. And we know that councils are embedding that climate and energy efficiency policies within their LDPs, but when I was reading those, the pathways of implementation are quite unclear. So I'm just wondering, would it be possible to ask the Department of Finance or the committee just to look at publishing a timetable for the new building regulations, and how then we can go back to our own department and ask how they're going to integrate with some of the work that DFC are doing on retrofit schemes. I think that joined up approach from both departments would be really, really useful. And then can we also potentially look at a joint briefing? I'm not sure if that's possible, between the Committee for Finance, Committee for Communities and the DERA Committee around mapping standards, retrofit funding and skills development, because I think all of the departments have a part to play when we're looking at this, and particularly around that decarbonisation. So you have that skills piece even in economy as well. Are we upskilling enough people to be able to future-proof this? And how does that fit within DFC's retrofitting programme and all that? So I think there's a piece there around that joined-up working approach.
Who would you like, if we were to do a joint committee of DERA, Finance and DFC, who would you like the briefing from? Officials within each department?
I think so. I think each, if there was any way of actually getting someone from each of the departments, spokespeople, is there?
I think there's a climate change grouping.
Okay.
I know that Angus Kerr is the head for DFC.
We heard from climate change a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
There was a briefing. There were 4 officials in for that.
It's more about the
It's about
joined
their
up approach. If there's a working group,
There's a
within-
climate change,
yeah.
I think, leads from each department, how they're achieving
So
it.
maybe they could link in with like a joint
Across the
committee meeting.
departmental group.
Yeah, we had that debate, sorry Chair, in the Assembly, and it sounded like nobody was talking to each other. You know, we've got finance, infrastructure with the planning side of things, communities with housing, and nobody's doing a joined up consideration on
I
this.
think in terms of our remit within communities to scrutinise the plans for particularly around energy efficiency, retrofitting, I think that it would be really helpful to know, you know, from each of the other department heads what is happening and are they talking to one another. That would be really useful if we could get a briefing from whether it is that climate change working group. I'm not sure.
Okay, so we'll scope that out.
It's a briefing rather than a joint committee meeting.
I think a briefing might be easier to organise.
Or just for this committee for first start off with,
particularly
sure.
for this,
And I suppose it would be probably better writing to the finance department rather than the committee for a timetable. The regulations, we can do that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else there on items 5.2 to 5.7? Happy enough? Okay, so we'll move on to items 5.8 to 5.11. So item 5.10 is correspondence from the department in relation to departmental briefings on statutory instruments amending social security legislation. Are members content that the further information sought by the committee is provided in the form of written briefing in the first instance?
Yes.
Yeah, you okay? Members content with that then?
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, Melissa, go ahead.
Just 5.11. I think we're still in the dark in relation to that item in itself. You know, and that there's no additional information like to us as a committee or the likes of it, and that we haven't had any indication either whether or not that the officials are prepared to actually brief the committee. But I think that should be pursued.
So that was the issue on the Shared Prosperity Fund that we brought
Yeah.
up at the last meeting as well.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. We can just ask for more kind of information from them to see.
NIO
What do they-
officials
Yeah,
specifically
yeah,
this time.
exactly.
Yeah.
The other thing,
John?
exactly what Melissa said, there's still a lack of clarity.
Yeah.
You know, we have been talking about this in this committee for well over a year, and NIO, I mean, even the decision to change the ratio to 70% capital, to me shows just a misunderstanding of what the community monetary sector here actually needs as a replacement to that funding. I'm really concerned about what, if any, bridge funding there's going to be to help projects if they're going to have to, move out of the funding and be able to actually even to wind down. We don't know any of those of any of the support that is going to be available for the organisations. We still don't know around eligibility or possible frameworks for what is coming forward, and we're less than 6 months out now. And how are we able to guarantee that co-design with the sector to actually understand what they need? And I know that we've all made representations. Everyone in this room has made representations about this, and specifically in the last 3 months, more so in the last year and a half. And it's just we're at an impossible cliff edge for these organisations.
Clerk, in our last correspondence, do we ask specifically for a written briefing, or an actual briefing from NIO
We
officials?
asked for a briefing in the last year, and we said the confirmation came back that we would be kept updated. This is a different minister, but a similar message, but no definitives around timeframes or what commitment.
I suppose we'll just-
Reiterate this, we're very much in the dark. We're as much in the dark today as what we always have been, and we still need that briefing essentially.
So can we put
In person?
Yeah,
briefing?
Yes, please.
we'll put in another request then for them to actually come in and brief the committee on it. As Shan and Melissa both said, it's going on now for a long time, so we would like some clarity on it.
Okay.
Okay, so if you're all happy, we'll move on to items 5.12 to 5.16. So items 5.12 and 13 are responses from the department to our committee regarding additional information to the soccer fund. So item 5.12 contains feedback to applicants, and item 5.13 contains an appended moderator's report, which I'll make very clear is embargoed indefinitely to members, so it is to be treated with confidentiality. Go on ahead, Kelly.
5.12, can we get a copy of the minutes that were had between the department and those football clubs? And 5.13, I appreciate the moderator's report is embargoed, however information outside of that report is widely available. I'm just unclear as to what our role as a committee is if we have been made aware of the content of that report from other sources that have provided information to us. I have emails that contain a lot of the information and the moderator's report that's all been redacted. The other thing is as well, I don't understand why it has been embargoed if in the embargoed report that a committee has received has redacted information in it. So it's a double layer of not giving us information or not allowing us to share information. So I would like the minutes of the meetings that has been had already with those football clubs that weren't successful, and then just a clarification maybe through the committee if we have information that has been provided outside of that report that is in the report that is now embargoed. It's in the public domain. It'd just be good to have that clarification of what that means for us as committee members.
That's grand, so we can write to the committee on both those topics. Mark?
You mean ask legal or to go back to the
'cause
department?
to be honest,
Because
I
it's not-
have information from an email that includes comments from the moderator saying that there were clubs who could not score. So, it's...
There's still a lot of grey areas there. So would you rather us write to the department or seek
Well,
legal advice
it's
on
more
the issue?
for us, as a committee,
Yeah.
if
I
we
think it's
received an embargoed report, but it's available elsewhere.
I will write
Okay.
that. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll bring in Mark and then I'll come to you, Morris, okay? Mark, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair or Deputy Chair. Just in terms of it's
good that we've got some more information. I think Kaylee touched on one of the points I'd made there about the double layering. I was wondering how they put it, and she's got it. I found a better way of describing it than I did. But also in the letter back from Tallow, we're told that on the 9th and 10th of October, the department received correspondence from legal advisors acting on behalf of three applicants. Now, I know we were aware of 2 applicants, but I'm not sure the third has been in the public domain.
I am not aware of them either, Mark. I know I've heard of the 2 as well, but I did see that there was the 3rd one mentioned.
Yeah.
So I can't comment on who it might be.
Yeah, I suppose it's up to the applicant as opposed to the department, so we can't ask the department, but
Yeah.
just
Embargoed.
pointing it out.
Right, oh, fair enough. Is that all, Mark?
Yeah, again, welcome the fact that we've got some of this back. It's sort of be careful what you wish for. We've been pushing for it, and they've sent back a lot of stuff. And while there's a lot in it, it'll take a while sort of to establish what isn't in it. That we need more. So I would support what Kelly had proposed.
Listen, as a committee, we can always go through it, take our time, go through it, and come back to it. You know, Morris, come on ahead in there.
Mm-hmm. I'm really frightened to speak, Chair, on this. Other than to ask a question over finance, could we ask the department how much of the 36.2 million has been allocated to the tranche that's already received the OK, and how much is left for the development of grassroots football, the development centre at the AFA, and also what plans are in place for disability sport, youth football and ladies football within the overall programme.
Okay, we'll put those questions to the department then. Thank
We
you.
have asked some of them already, so no money has been allocated so far.
No, it's not been allocated, but
But-
the total of the fund has been allocated in paper. Whether it's all drawn down or not is a different matter, and that worries me.
Follow that up.
Okay, you okay with that, Clerk? All right, so we can follow all this up again. As I say, we've got time to look at it, and we have sought legal advice on some of these matters, so when we get more information from them as well, we'll hopefully
17th
know
of
where
November.
That's when we're due to get
Come back. Yeah.
receive more legal advice again, 17th November, so we can address this again as a committee. So thank you for that.
I just come in,
Yes,
just
Mona,
on
Jan.
5.15, it's the response from Derry City and Strabane District Council. I just really want to welcome the fact that John Kelpie and Una McGillen are Director of Legacy, are willing to meet with us. I think in terms of the anti-poverty strategy, it's not only an executive-wide led strategy, but it is also going to go out into society, and local government has such a part to play in terms of addressing poverty, you know, whether that's the employability schemes or the community plan and all the input that we'll have from local councils. So I just really want to welcome the fact that Derry and Strabane are willing to meet with us, and hopefully we'll see more council chief execs willing to engage. It can only make us stronger in terms of how our response to the anti-poverty strategy goes forward. So just want to welcome that.
I agree, Shan, and I think it's really worthwhile getting them in to actually brief us. Alicia, you want to come in that point?
And just on exactly the same point, I'm looking forward to actually meeting with John and Una again in this committee, having worked as a councillor in the Derry City and Strabane Council itself. Not only that, but in fact the response that they provided to us as well too, it clearly sets out many of the criticisms that we are only too well aware of in relation to the strategy, and that not only applies for say to Derry City and Strabane but to a lot of other council areas as well. And just as Shan has implied too, I'd like to think that other chief executives will step up to the plate and come forward to this committee as well and inform us just what is actually happening on the ground for them, and to what extent it was that organisations within their own area had made a contribution, to what extent it ever was taken on board.
So,
I look forward to that.
thank you, Alicia. I think I'm right in saying we have put a request to the chief executives of
Yeah,
each
we
council
have.
to come in
That's
and
just
present.
one of them back. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Mark, you want to come in that point as well? Mark? Oh, did you want to come in that point?
No, sorry, Chair. It was actually back on 5.14, the committee response to the SUDS. Well, I know you're on infrastructure as well, and so I hadn't made this point when we previously
this previously came to committee, the response is fine in terms of what's in it, but there's also an element in this legislation that it changes or enshrines in legislation positive changes to the homeowner flood protection grant, and that is a grant that homeowners can apply for. But I've seen in its current carnation issues where social housing tenants are unable to access this because they don't own their own home. Their own home, so there might be something worth raising there. Just as to whether, I suppose, social landlords can apply for assistance through this scheme, or some way of facilitating their tenants to do so.
Okay, so Clerk, are you happy to add?
Yep, we can review that and add it into the draft response. Would members like to see that again?
Is there a deadline for this response?
There is. I think it's tight enough. I think it might be next week, but we might be able to bring it back. Or if it's too late, I can provide it by correspondence.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not precious, but
Okay.
it's important to ensure the protection of those tenants, I suppose, and to give them equal opportunity to homeowners.
No, that's fair enough, Mark. And I was going to come back to that there point, so we'll get that redrafted then, that report, and get the committee to hopefully agree on it, and we can move forward with it.
Chair,
Yes.
apologies for being late this morning. I was actually talking about sign language things this morning, so it kept me slightly late. Could I go back, with your permission, to 5.6? It's the
Yes,
Housing
that's the
Executive
last one.
Priority Needs Policy Amendments.
Yeah.
Can we ask the department what notification that they have provided to the arm's length bodies about their use of language? On page 48 of our pack, the Housing Executive uses an outdated term when referring to people with disabilities. They've used the term handicap, which is, to be honest, outdated and discriminatory. I'm very disappointed at something that's been produced in May 2025 includes language like that, but if we could ask the department, given the remit that they have for the disability strategy, what information has been provided to arm's length bodies to ensure that they use up-to-date, modern, respectful language as opposed to something like that. Yep. When I was reading through it, it jumped out at me and battered me in the face. It's used in the contents page and on that page 48. I'm just staggered at somebody that's talking about priority needs for housing is using such outdated language.
No, I think that's a very fair point, Kelly, and surely we'll write off to the department and not their issue, absolutely.
5.4.2, Emer, if
That's really helpful. Thank you.
In that report, yeah.
in the report.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, so let me see where I'm now. So happy with 5.14 and 5.15.
Yeah.
And we're going to ask Derry Council to come in and brief us. Derry and Strabane Council. That's grand. That's the end of matters rising. Then we'll move on to correspondence, and we'll do the same thing. So the memo table there is page 128. Is that okay, Clerk?
Yep.
So we'll do the same. We'll just move through in chunks, and you can draw out or highlight any issues that you have. So we'll start off with item 6.2 to 6.66, and I'll just say item 6.5. That's correspondence from the Clerk of the Committee for Finance, asking if our committee has received similar correspondence from BITES and asking what actions we propose to take. We haven't received any information from them, so are you content that we respond to that committee just to say we haven't received any information? Yeah, content, thank you. Go ahead, Kelly.
6.4, just as is noted, yes, we would like to ask the department for sight of its bids and the paperwork. Yeah, there's a lot going on here. It's dropped from 9.3 of an overspend to nothing. Yeah, but we would like to see what their bids are as well. Yeah.
That's to ask the Department for Communities for sight of its bids into the monitoring round
Yes.
programme.
Okay.
And updating what they're not bidding for, what they've dropped, what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Just on.
Yeah, and an explanation of that rebalancing of the books.
Yeah. Yes. Huge rebalancing of the books, 9.3 million gone.
Enough of that, Clerk?
Yes.
Grand. So I just want to flag as well item 6.8. it's a complaint from an individual, and I know previously this committee and other committees have urged any individual complaints to get in touch with their MLA or with whatever organisation is kind of responsible for the complaint. So are the committee happy that we do the same in this regard?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to item 6.12 to 16.
Sure. I thought you'd went up to 6.8 and not just on 6.9 and 6.10, if it's okay if I come in. Is that okay? Yeah, it's just around the UK City and Town of Culture competitions. I think they're a great idea. I think they can deliver regeneration, tourism, social benefits, bit of a focus on our incredible cultural landscape here. I'm just wondering how towns across Northern Ireland are going to be supported in putting in that bid. We talk an awful lot in this committee about the regional balance, and it would be really good to see some towns potentially outside of those kind of the core places that a lot of the arts funding goes to being represented there. So I'm just wondering is there any way of asking the department, have they any support process or support mechanism, have they any involvement? And whilst these schemes are UK government delivered, just whether our own department has any kind of influence or support mechanism to any teams from our towns that would want to just be in the department with the remit for culture. So just whether they're going to provide any development support.
That's fair, thank you. And sorry, Shan, you're right, I did jump there. We're now going through 6.7 to 6.11, or 6.11. So if anyone else wants to comment on those items, please do. You all happy enough? Okay, so we'll move on then to 6.12 to 6.16 as before. And item 6.15 is correspondence from the department regarding the draft executive disability strategy. The Minister has requested that committee members treat the strategy contents with complete confidentiality prior to the launch of the public consultation. Do members wish to schedule a briefing as soon as possible with the department? Yeah.
Yes, please.
Thank you. What's at the end of that?
Some tabled items of correspondence.
So that's the end of the normal correspondence. Okay, so in your tabled papers, there's correspondence there on page. There's a correspondence memo on page 3, and then correspondence 6.18 to 6.19. If any members have any issues or want to raise anything there, happy enough.
Good.
That's grand. So we'll note all that correspondence then.
Okay.
Thank you, Clerk. Okay, so we'll move on to item number 7, which is we're getting a briefing on the occupational pension schemes, collective money purchases schemes, miscellaneous amendments regulations 2025, and we do have officials coming in to brief us. Yep, thanks, Chris. To members, there's a copy of the SL1 at page 471 of your pack. The proposed rule would make minor technical changes linked to collective money purchase schemes under existing pensions legislation. The rule would correct drafting errors and remove duplicated wording in the 2006 Employer Consultation Regulations and amend the 2014 Disclosure Regulations for collective money purchase schemes to tidy drafting and refine disclosure and publication requirements following initial implementation. It is proposed that the rule will come into operation on the 4th of December 2025 and will be subject to the negative resolution procedure. I'd like to welcome the following officials to the meeting. We've got Hayley Ward, who's Policy Lead, and Keira McKeown, who's Deputy Policy Lead. So Hayley, I'd like to invite you to make a few opening remarks, and then we can go to members for questions if they have any.
Sure.
Please.
Good morning, and thank you for the invitation to discuss the occupational pension schemes, collective money purchase schemes, miscellaneous amendments regulations, Northern Ireland 2025. Collective money purchase schemes were introduced by the Pension Schemes Act 2021, and they offer an alternative to defined benefit and defined contribution schemes. These regulations make technical corrections and amendments to existing secondary legislation. corrections to the occupational and personal pension schemes, consultation by employers regulations Northern Ireland 2006 will remove duplicated wording to improve clarity. Amendments to the occupational and personal pension schemes disclosure of information regulations Northern Ireland 2014 will provide minor technical corrections and adjustments to enhance the clarity and effectiveness of disclosure requirements for collective money purchase schemes, including the removal of unnecessary duplication in the communication of certain member information. This rule allows an exemption for trustees or managers of the scheme from having to provide information to certain persons where this information is not considered appropriate. It also disapplies a restriction on trustees or managers of the scheme giving information by an electronic communication where the information is required to be published on a website to avoid unnecessary burdens on schemes. Additionally, this rule removes the existing requirement for collective money purchase schemes to include the annual benefit statement, the value of a member's share of the available assets in the current year, as well as the previous year. Finally, the provisions requiring publication of changes to certain information, such as the scheme design summary, are amended to clarify the required timing of the publication. The regulations are technical in nature. They have been screened and no equality or regulatory impacts have been identified. The statutory rule is subject to the negative procedure and the 21-day rule. The Department intends to make and lay the rule by the 13th of November to comply with this requirement and ensure it comes into operation on the 4th of December 2025. That provides a brief overview of the proposed regulations, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, Hayley, thanks very much for that there. This all does seem very technical and really just like minor changes, I suppose, just to clarify things for people. And I imagine the committee will be happy enough to go through with it. But does any member have any questions for our officials? You're all happy enough? No. You got off lightly today.
An easy one.
Absolutely. You can receive them. Okay, then I will put it to the committee then. Do members, are you content for the department to proceed to make the rule then?
Yes,
please. Great. Thank you both very much for coming
you.
in. Appreciate that there. Thank you. Okay. So we'll move on then, members, to item number 8, which is the SR for the Social Fund, Child Funeral Fund, number 2, Amendment Regulations 2025. So a copy of the SR is at page 486 for our reference. And I'd just like to remind members that the committee considered the SL1 at our last committee meeting on the 23rd of October when we were content for the department to make the rule. Have any members any objections to the rule at this stage? No objections? No. Okay. So I'll just put the question then to the committee, that the Committee for Communities has considered SR 2025/169, the Social Fund, Child Funeral Fund, number 2, Amendment Regulations NI 2025, and has no objection to the rule, subject to the report from the Examiner of Statutory Rules. Are members agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Okay, then we'll move on to item number 9. So we've got a departmental briefing on the Community Infrastructure Fund. So members, the briefing paper for this agenda item starts at page 493. It's item number 9 there. I'd like to welcome the following officials to the meeting. We've got Paul McNaught, Director of the Regional Development Office and SRO for the Community Infrastructure Fund. Rosheen Thompson, Deputy Director with the Regional Development Office and Programme Manager for the Community Infrastructure Fund, and Christo McConnell, who's Head of Branch for the Community Infrastructure Fund. So Paul, I invite you to make a brief opening statement and then we can move on to questions from members, okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to brief you today in the Northern Ireland Community Infrastructure Fund. The Northern Ireland Community Infrastructure Fund has been developed as a targeted intervention in recognition of the critical role community buildings play at grassroots level and the pressures facing the sector. The fund responds directly to the urgent need for support, particularly around the physical condition and sustainability of community infrastructure. The need was corroborated through engagement with sectoral umbrella organisations and other funders who consistently highlighted the deteriorating state of many community buildings, the limited availability of funding for minor capital works, and increasing strain on community organisations, often experience an increased demand for services while operating under challenging financial circumstances and reliance on volunteer-led efforts. The fund aims to bridge this gap by offering practical financial support that enables organisations to maintain safe, functional and welcoming spaces for local communities. The Minister's vision for the fund is rooted in the belief that infrastructure is not just about bricks and mortar, it's about enabling people, places and potential. Community buildings play a vital role in social infrastructure, delivering services, providing essential hubs for social cohesion and supporting well-being. The combined impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, severe weather events such as Storm Owen, and the ongoing cost of living and energy cost increases have added to the strain on community facilities. The fund supports the Department's commitment to tackling disadvantage, promoting inclusion and investing in place-based regeneration. It also aligns with the programme for government's emphasis on fostering inclusive, resilient communities and contributes to outcomes in areas such as well-being, social inclusion and community empowerment. The fund is a significant capital investment of £4.3 million, offering grants of up to £40,000 to voluntary community organisations seeking to improve the internal or external fabric of their community building. All projects must contribute to one or more of the following objectives: improve the physical condition of the community building, increase energy efficiency and reduce maintenance costs of the building, increase accessibility of the facility, increase usage of the community building. The aim of the fund is to enable community organisations to better meet the needs of people they serve by ensuring that their building is safe, inclusive, accessible, energy efficient and fit for purpose. The fund is a pilot scheme and we are using this phase to build understanding of need, test delivery mechanisms and capture lessons learned. Engagement with key stakeholders began in February 2025. Discussions were held with representative bodies, other funders, local infrastructure organisations and officials in both local councils and other jurisdictions who have delivered similar initiatives. Throughout this engagement, we heard about the continued importance of community buildings as vital shared spaces that strengthen local networks and build resilience. Stakeholders emphasised that since the pandemic, the role of these facilities has expanded. Another key message emerging from this engagement was that community buildings belonging to the faith sector, whilst playing an important role as an inclusive space, have been unwilling or unable to avail of certain sources of grant funding. In response, this fund has ensured that faith organisations that are available for non-faith activities will be eligible to apply for funding. Minister Lyons made a written statement to the Assembly on 26th of June that set out his intention to launch the Northern Ireland Community Infrastructure Fund in autumn and outlining the purpose and objectives of the fund. Business case approval was obtained from the Department of Finance on 29th of August for a total of £4.752 million expenditure. This includes £4.32 million in capital to fund project works and a further £430,000 in resource funding to cover their delivery costs. The fund was formally launched on 24th of September at the Pomeroy Forest Park building. All members of the Legislative Assembly, Northern Ireland members of Parliament and key voluntary and community sector stakeholders were invited, including umbrella and local infrastructure organisations. The launch included a ministerial address followed by a panel discussion with representatives from the voluntary and community sector. The panel provided their thoughts and views on the potential impact of the fund, the current needs and challenges facing the sector, and their experiences of how capital grant schemes can strengthen community facilities and deliver positive outcomes. Over 70 delegates attended, representing a wide cross-section of community organisations and infrastructure bodies. A comprehensive guidance document was also published on the Department's website and shared with the committee. In an oral statement to the Assembly on 30 September, Minister Lyons provided an update on the fund's objectives, eligibility criteria and delivery model, and answered members' questions. To increase awareness and provide support to potential applicants, the Department hosted a series of information sessions. More than 500 people attended either online or in-person sessions in Dungannon, Derry, Londonderry, Belfast, Enniskillen, Larne or Newry. Support is also available to participants through a dedicated mailbox and helpline. A recording of one of the online sessions and a frequently asked questions document was also published online. The fund has been delivered in partnership with Cooperation Ireland, who the Department has appointed as an intermediate funding body to administer the programme. Cooperation Ireland is responsible for managing the application process, administering grants to successful applicants, and overseeing the delivery of the funded projects. Applications will be assessed independently by Cooperation Ireland against the criteria set by the Department. The department retains policy responsibility and will oversee the operation of the fund at programme level through a programme board, which I will chair as senior responsible owner. The board will monitor Cooperations Ireland's delivery of the fund in line with financial and performance targets. The board will also oversee the alignment of projects delivered with programme outcomes. To make the process accessible and to avoid unnecessary administrative burdens, the fund has been operated as a two-stage application process. Stage 1, an expression of interest, opened on 1st of October and closed on 29th of October. This involved a short form designed to confirm eligibility and project suitability. Only organisations that pass Stage 1 will be invited to submit a full application at Stage 2. Stage 2 will open on 19th November and close on 9th of January 2026. At Stage 2, applicants will be asked to provide detailed project information and will be scored to produce a merit order of successful applicants. Letters of offers to successful applicants will then expect to issue during March 26, with projects commencing from the 1st of April of that year. The eligible delivery period will run for one financial year from April 26 to March 27. Projects will complete end of progress reports by 31st July 2027, with the evaluation of the delivery aspects of the programme expected to be delivered by Operation Ireland by December 2027. The department will then complete an independent post-programme evaluation within 12 months of programme closure. The fund is a competitive grant scheme with a capital budget of 4.32 million. If all organisations draw down the maximum grant award of 40,000, the fund will support a minimum of 108 individual projects. The precise number will depend on the level of funding requested by each successful applicant. Organisations that are eligible for the Northern Ireland Community Infrastructure Fund will be constituted not-for-profit, voluntary or community organisations. The organisations need to own or have leased their community building for a minimum of 10 years from 1st of April 2025. The community building must be accessible to and used by the wider community for social, educational and recreational purposes. The fund is open to a wide range of voluntary community buildings, including church halls, village halls, orange halls, sports clubs and other community centres which provide a range of community activities. Eligible projects must have a total cost of between £10,000 and £50,000, with the department contributing a maximum grant of up to £40,000. Applicants are required to provide a minimum of 5% of project costs, which encourages ownership and sustainability whilst ensuring public value. Eligible works include structural repairs, refurbishments, accessibility upgrades and energy efficiency measures. Stage 1 of the application process closed last week with 835 applications received. Cooperation Ireland is currently reviewing expressions of interest and outcomes will be communicated to applicants by the 19th of November. Cooperation Ireland will be hosting further online information sessions for applicants proceeding to Stage 2. So to conclude, the Northern Ireland Community Infrastructure is a timely and targeted intervention that we believe will deliver real benefits for communities across Northern Ireland. We're grateful for the chance to brief the committee on the fund, and I share your commitment to ensure that public investment is delivering tangible benefits for communities across Northern Ireland. That concludes my opening statement, and my colleagues and I would now welcome your questions.
Okay, thank you, Paul, and your officials for the briefing. I have a couple of questions, and then I'll move around to other members. First of all, I must say, as a representative of West Rowan, I was really disappointed that there were no information sessions held in Omagh or Strabane, the main towns in the area. Despite actually, I put it through requests as well, because obviously in rural areas specifically, many of our community groups would have benefited from information on such a fund. So we can keep that in mind for future projects, that you don't forget about West Rowan. And okay, Paul, so the fund was officially launched in Pomeroy on 21st of September, and expressions of interest were to be initiated on the 1st of October and then close on the 29th of October, which doesn't leave a wide lot of time, to be honest. So I wonder what the rationale is there behind the fund requiring the pre-existing planning permission, given there's such a short time frame. Like that would make it impossible for some groups who haven't had plan permission to actually to get that there. So what was the rationale behind that? And were some organisations told in advance that this fund was going to be processed and to have their plan applications in gear?
I'm happy to come in on that, Chair. apologies we couldn't come to your constituency in West Tyrone. We did receive some invitations from MLAs to attend particular ones, but we are a very small team working at pace and we just weren't able to facilitate that, but we'll bear it in mind for future information sessions. In terms of the planning, it was really a pragmatic decision. This is a pilot with a very short window to deliver projects, and realistically organisations that didn't already have planning permission in place by the time stage 1 started would be unlikely to have that in place with pre-planning conditions discharged by the start of the delivery period at the 1st of April. So we were conscious that we were probably excluding a small number of projects at that stage. The total project costs are capped at £50,000. And whilst we weren't going to meet the need of all organisations who need refurbishment works that maybe do require planning, it was a pragmatic response really to decide to cap it at basically at a value that projects could proceed under that, either small refurbishments, do you know what I mean, for £50,000. You're not going to get major restructuring and we're not going to fund extensions or new buildings. But it would be something that if there was a more long-term programme that we would certainly look at, being able to enable people to have planning in place. And I think it's fair to say if people knew that a scheme was coming forward and had a longer lead-in time for that, then they would be able to get their planning in place. But practically speaking, we knew if they didn't have it in October, they wouldn't be able to start their project in April.
Okay, and had any other organisations been made aware of this here fund going to be announced in the coming months, whatever, in order to get their plan permission in ahead of time?
No, so the eligibility criteria was made available for the first time publicly at the launch and to the committee at the same time. There was extensive stakeholder engagement with funders and umbrella groups who we saw expertise from, who have maybe run other schemes that are very similar. And there would have been an awareness in the sector that there was something coming, but nobody was made aware of exactly where the department had landed on that until the eligibility guidance was published.
Chair, can I come in on both those points?
Yes, sure.
So, as Rosheen said there, that the focus of the scheme is on refurbishment. So we don't expect many organisations requiring planning permission. And that was part of through our engagement with sectoral leaders, was trying to understand in terms of, as we developed the criteria and eligibility of the scheme, it was testing with them in terms of if we're doing minor works, and our engagement with leaders in the sector turned around and said, actually what a lot of community organisations essentially need is a small level of capital investment to repair or modernise what they already have, which wouldn't be bound in the main by planning permission.
Okay, right.
Can I just follow up on that? I'm a bit concerned about that because if you're doing disabled access works, you normally are asked for planning permission for those. Was that considered?
In terms of, I can't remember specifically around disabled access. I know that there's requirements around building control, but again, accessibility is one objective of the scheme. It's not all objectives, but also what we found is that through our information sessions, a number of organisations have already identified that they need these improvements. So some of them will already have that as part of their organisational plan or their future intention. So they have, a number of organisations have already got those statutory approvals in place. It just wasn't the funding available. So part of it is around matching what the need was or what they've identified as the need, and therefore aligned with the funding.
Okay, community organisations that were able to afford to go on ahead and get planning permission for something they couldn't afford. I'm thinking about lifts, you see, and the ramps outside buildings. That any buildings that I've been involved with in the past have needed planning permission, which would extend the timeline out, especially for a lift.
If I can just go in there, Chair, as Rosheen said, look, the main rationale behind this was the type programme that we're working to in order to deliver. So if they hadn't got planning permission in by the start of the scheme, it was unlikely to be ready for the 1st of April for the programme to start. But as Rosheen has said, we will take that on board should any further scheme come forward.
Yeah. Paul, I also want to ask you, at the end of your briefing there, you mentioned, I think you said 835 applicants you received, or applications you received. Can you tell us, or can you break that information down into geography? Where have you got that kind of detail of where?
We were just currently analysing the information at this minute. The information just literally come through last week. I think it was last Thursday, wasn't it, that the programme shut. So we're still analysing, but we're happy to come back right to the committee on that. We can provide more detail on that when we've analysed it.
That'd be very helpful. Thank you, Paul. And just finally, I want to ask about the role of the programme board through the department. What exactly is your role, and what power will that have to step in or influence decisions by Cooperation Ireland?
In terms of the decision of Cooperation Ireland, the decisions will be made by Cooperation Ireland, but there will be a moderation panel that my two colleagues will be sitting on, which will moderate it, but the actual decisions will be made by Cooperation Ireland. The programme board will oversee the delivery and make sure that the programme is running smoothly, ensure all the risks are managed, etc. But in terms of decision making, that will be led by Cooperation Ireland.
And who else will sit on the programme board?
I'll be the chair. We haven't.
So it will be chaired by Cooperation Ireland. Christo and I will represent the department, and Cooperation Ireland have sought some independent expertise from within the sector. We're not 100% sure who's accepted that yet, but we're hoping to have it firmed up in the next week or two, and we're happy to write to you with the final membership as well.
That'd be great, thank you. Right, I'll move on to other members here. Morris, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Thanks very much for your presentation. And at the outset, I know you had an awful lot of headline areas to give presentation to, but I would be wrong of me if I didn't praise the Minister for taking time out of his busy schedule to visit a small rural hall in the Korean area personally, and I'd like to thank him for that on the record. 4.3 million. Has there been any indication of a contribution from DAERA towards this fund so far, or is that still a promise in the air?
The DAERA Minister in an oral question in the House stated his intention to discuss this with our ministers. So the officials have had some discussions, and we hope to follow up that further, and we'll let you know what the outcome of those discussions.
Very good. But if perchance there is extra money coming from the Minister, will that have an impact on the 835 projects and potential 110 projects that may be successful to go through the second stage?
Well, the 108 is based on everyone getting the maximum grant of 40,000, so we would hope there was some more go through. If additional money became available, then obviously that would mean more projects would be able to be taken forward.
Through you, Chair. The other question I had to ask was regional balance. Will the funding be distributed in a regional balance methodology rather than...
Happy to come in on that, Chair.
Yeah.
We obviously are operating a pilot at the minute, and part of the reason that we decided to run this programme as a pilot is because we don't really have any evidence on what the need across the sector is. Certainly from our engagements, we can tell that it's wide and diverse, and that there's a great need there. I think that's shown through the fact that at stage one, with a 4 or 5 week lead-in, we have 835 applications for support. But in order to recommend a kind of predetermined geographic target of any kind, we would have needed some evidence to base that on, to compare with the need, and that evidence wasn't there. That is part of the reason that we're running a pilot, is to gather evidence to try and better understand the need, and it might be something we would consider in future.
Yeah, through you, Chair. I mean, 835 applications in a small time frame is amazing, and it just shows the need out there for community halls, sports halls and faith-based halls for refurbishment, and I congratulate the Minister on bringing this programme forward. So yeah, thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you, Morris. Militia?
Factor over issues are all very welcome again here to the committee. Just in relation to, and as Morris alluded to there, with the faith-based organisations and so on, and sort of what activities is it that faith-based organisations will be able to offer that will meet the criteria? And asking that question, I also asked then in conjunction with that Orange Halls, they've been specified separately. And given that the Orange Order is actually a faith-based organisation, why is it that they have been specified separately? And will they be required to meet the same criteria, we'll say, as in terms of non-faith-based activities when it comes to making an application for the grants?
Sure, I'll take this question. So, in terms of our engagement in designing the scheme, we engaged with the conveners of the Community Faith Forum and some other funders, and what really arose there was that faith-based organisations that own community spaces play a key role in terms of their space being open up to the wider community, but they had been unable to get funding from lottery because of the purposes of advancement of religion. So that is why faith is named particularly. But in terms of those buildings belong to faith-based organisations, so we know that they're used for mums and tots groups, do you mean, for English classes, for newcomer communities. Like in a lot of cases, it was identified that they actually become a community hub and they're really used in that broad space. So in some examples, there may be faith-based organisations where they may not have a separate hall, so actually that place of worship is also used for the community facilities, so we've tried to bring that flexibility. So essentially for the faith-based organisations or the Orange Halls, what we would try to say is that it may be used as your primary purpose, but it may be used for other purposes. So for example, even in the Orange Halls, it may be used for a youth group or other groups coming into that, and so that's one of the things we'll ask for in stage 2, is ask groups to articulate who uses your community space and the frequency and the volume, things like that there.
If I could just come and share on the criteria, all groups will be assessed against the same criteria, so there's no different criteria for different organisations.
The Orange Halls will be treated the same as non-faith, with non-faith activities as other groups. Okay.
There's one scoring framework for the whole of the fund.
all applicants. Okay. Melissa, is that you finished?
Yeah.
Thank you. Kelly, do you want to come in there?
Thank you very much. Folks, having run grant schemes myself in the past, 835 isn't surprising. I'm actually surprised you didn't have more. But good luck to Cooperation Ireland dealing with those. They've got a short period of time to turn those round. It would be useful, as the Chair has mentioned, if at stage 1 we could get a bit of an idea of the geography and the type of organisations that have come through. I'm quite keen to make sure that faith groups are, if we're including them, that they are there. I know in my own area that there are a lot of halls that are used for various different aspects. But what I would like to know as well is, you've talked about the organisation doesn't just have to own the premises, they could have leased it on a long-term basis, and many of those are council premises. Are they excluded from this, or how many of the 835 applications, or even those that go through to stage 2, are actually council buildings that are applying for money? You would sort of expect that they maybe would be able to get money from elsewhere. I also have a question about Cooperation Ireland. Very kindly, the department had responded to a question that I had, that Cooperation Ireland are receiving £432,000 over 3 years to administer the fund. Now, the fund that's available at the moment is 4.32 million. That's for this round, not for 3 years. The amount that Cooperation Ireland have been awarded for administration is 10% of this round's money. Does that mean then that they would be offered more later for other rounds? And also, could we just get a wee bit more clarification on the breakdown of money? So the 4.32 million in the paper that we had received, that would, if everybody got the 40,000, that would be 108 applications achieved. At stage 1, we'll know whether or not people have got lower amounts. Is there an opportunity for more than 108 to come forward? And also, wee bit just on the procurement of Cooperation Ireland and how that came through, because I couldn't find anywhere how that was advertised for. Yeah. Sorry, thank you. That's a lot. Sorry.
Ellie, you may have to remind me.
Yep.
There's a lot of questions there. So the first one was in terms of councils. So where a council owns the community facility, it is not eligible for the fund. Okay.
Yeah.
And sort of linked to that is around 835. So 835 is the number of organisations that have put in an expression of interest, but essentially because it is an expression of interest, and there was comments there around the short window, but actually that expression of interest was like quite light touch. What Cooperation Ireland are doing now is looking at all of those expressions of interest, how many of those are eligible, and again that will be tested again in stage 2, but we've tried to be really proportionate and minimise bureaucracy for organisations in the process, and that's why we have a 2-stage process. So that was the question around the councils. There was a question around the funding. So the 4.32 million is the capital fund, which we would expect to fund the delivery from the 1st of April next year till, whereas the funding allocated to Cooperation Ireland, so that is to cover the work and the support that they're doing over the duration of the programme, so starting from the 1st of September until the programme evaluation.
Okay.
If there was additional funding that was allocated to the scheme, then it would be require additional resource funding for them to oversee and manage delivery.
In terms of any future scheme, you mentioned that the 4,432,000 is literally for for this one programme, 1 year programme. If there was a further scheme, part of this pilot is to test the delivery mechanisms. So we will be reviewing that in terms of any future scheme and looking at the potential delivery. Another option could be, for example, in-house delivery for future schemes.
Okay.
And then your last question was around the process to appoint
Yeah.
Cooperation Ireland. So one of the evaluations of the 2016 scheme recommended that a third party or independent funding body administered the scheme. Our relationship with Cooperation Ireland is a grant funding relationship, and essentially because Cooperation Ireland are a voluntary community organisation, it is still the department investing in the sector. Our approach to that grant funding relationship, whilst we did consider a competitive process to the grant funding relationship, through our engagement, including with other funders and speaking to the funders forum, there weren't a lot of other funders who were able to fund capital, also fund faith-based organisations, and had the capacity and expertise to deliver within the time period. So it was a non-competitive grant to Cooperation Ireland.
I don't know why administration has any difficulty with providing for non or faith-based organisations, because it's a different process.
A number of independent funders are unable to fund faith-based organisations.
This is government money that it's just being it's only the grants application process that's being administered.
So an independent funding body is then administering the grants on to faith-based organisations. So, for example, if you are a community organisation that are faith-based, then some faith-based organisations are unwilling to take funding from the lottery, but also there are some other funders that are unable to fund organisations that have advancement of religion as part of their constitution.
I think maybe I'll question you on that one, because I don't think that that's fair procurement process in this matter. No difficulty with Cooperation Ireland, but it's the process that I'm concerned about. That's nonsense, to be honest. In a competitive situation, like for instance, I have delivered grants on behalf of a government organisation before. You bid for what you want to bid for. It's got nothing to do with what the money's about. It's about your ability of being able to process applications in a timely manner and have open and transparent services and being able to turn things around on time. So I'm a little bit disappointed, and I hope through the programme, I know this is a pilot, that a reflection will be on that there should be a procurement, because this is a significant amount of money that's going out. And while Cooperation Ireland, I appreciate, would be very good to do that, there are others that could have done this and may have done it for less than the 10%. It just seems quite a specific figure of 10% of the grant, or equivalent of the grant, that's being spent on administration. I know of others that could have done it a bit cheaper for you. Yeah.
Through the chair, to take your points on the non-competitive grant, as I said, if we go to a future scheme, we will look at all delivery processes. We did, however, run this process through internal audit and our commercial services, and we got sign off from both those organisations, so they were content that what we did was appropriate. But I'll note your feedback for any future scheme.
It's just I can't see how competition was fair on this then.
So because it is grant,
Doesn't matter. Yeah.
Because it is grant as opposed to procurement. So with the grant standards, you can evidence why you're doing a non-competitive grant, and that is what we had done in our process, which we had got the internal sign off and approvals.
I think you're missing the point. 432,000 may well have been the amount that you guys had decided, but if you put it out to procurement for a contract, then it actually would have been more cost effective for the department. We are a scrutiny committee, and I have to think about the money. 432,000 over 3 years is a lot. And even though it's 835, it could have been 1,835 applications in. It still wouldn't have cost £432,000 to process. It's just a concern that I would have, that there was a decision to use a non-profit organisation to run these grants without a proper procurement process. And I think that maybe for future that should be taken on board. It's a lot of money out of communities when we know that there are other things that can't be funded.
That's grand, Kelly. I think
Thank you.
that's a fair enough point, actually, and maybe we could raise it again, pardon me, in another kind of forum. Before I let you go, just run through and make sure no other members have any... Oh, sorry, Mark's got his hand up there. I'll let Mark come on ahead then.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to Paul and the team for coming in. A few of the points have already been touched on, or questions asked and answered. But I was wondering, like, given the volume of applications that there is, given the short time frame for turnaround, you've 830 expressions of interest there to sort of wade through and whittle down. How intensive or deep is the assessment process going to be? I mean, what sort of evidential threshold will be required of applicants and so forth? Both obviously in terms of ownership, yes, but also in terms of that wider community use that is essential criteria too.
If I could come in on that. So it's just important to note that stage one, we have had 835 applications, but it is an eligibility check, and stage one, as my colleague said, was a proportionately short form to enable organisations to test whether this was the right fund for their project and whether their organisation was eligible. And we have asked for evidence of wider community use at stage one. What we would anticipate is that a smaller number than 835 moves forward to stage two, which will be a much more intense undertaking. It'll be a detailed application form asking for a lot more detailed information about the organisation, the project, and the community building itself, and asking for further evidence of usage by the community. So we have tried to be flexible in how people can demonstrate wider community use. It may be something in an organisation's constitution that says it's inherently open. It may be a booking form for a week or for a month that shows exactly who's coming in, but usage and diversity of usage will be eligibility and scored criteria at stage two.
Happy enough for that, Mark?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I suppose it's how you check the veracity of some of these claims. It will be difficult, when you're dealing with that volume, and I appreciate the 835 will have reduced a bit. By the next stage, I'm not sure how dramatically it will have reduced, given the low bar.
We lost you, Mark.
I'm there, Mark.
Mark, you went on mute there. We can't hear you.
You missed that. No, I know it. Well, the 835 will be reduced, I'm sure, by the next stage. I'm not sure how dramatically it will be reduced, given the low bar that has been set, and I understand and appreciate why the bar has been set low, because you want to include as many people or organisations or properties as possible. But even the next window, none of these windows are well big for turning things around at various stages of the process, and but it is imperative that checks are robust, just to ensure full compliance with the scheme as set out, and just proper and appropriate use of public.
If I come in here, Chair, in terms of Cooperation Ireland, we have a grant funding agreement with them that sets out their requirement. Now, the one good thing about delegating this to an intermediate funding body, they have all resources they can bring in. So, because it's oversubscribed, we would expect them now to put additional resources in to support the assessment and delivery of the scheme. In terms of the monitoring, there will be monitoring the scheme. It will be done in a commensurate effort. These are small grants, so we don't want to be overburdensome. But at the end of the scheme as well, there'll be a post-project report that will be provided by each of the organisations, setting out the outcomes that were delivered and the impact that they've had in the community.
Right, thank you, Mark. And Paul, again, thank you, and Christo and Rosheen for your information here today, and there are a few actions that we'll follow up as a committee with yourselves. If we can get information, that'll be very helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Right. So we'll just go through a couple of the actions from that briefing, if I can find them. So we're going to get a breakdown of the applications, kind of a geographic breakdown.
Geographical spread and the types of organisation.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Very helpful too. And Rosheen said she would provide us with an update on who was appointed to the programme board.
Representation on the board.
Yeah. And then Kelly, did you want to?
Yeah, if we could ask for a copy of the information that they received to say that they didn't need to go out to procurement. It seems a bit weird, yeah.
10% is a lot when you put it that way. When over 3 years.
Well, to be honest, they could have got 15%. Would have been but it's just because they grant fund them. You know, they can do this process. It's a lot of money to handle. I just don't know. Yeah. If we can get the information that the department have received, that they were told that they didn't have to go out to procurement, that would be useful.
Okay. So everything, no other actions from that? No.
I think just the feedback that I have had from organisations in my own constituency is that the stage 1 process is a really good idea.
Okay.
Because they just don't have the capacity to fill out really long application forms to then not get through to the next round, because they've discovered some wee minor eligibility flaws. So I think even passing back some feedback to the department to say that if we are considering this, particularly for small grassroots organisations, that a short stage 1 that kind of just gets the basics and they don't have to put in as much information and as much effort is a really good idea, just because it saves organisations the effort and the
have to go
capacity.
out to get consultants and that there to try and,
Ridiculous.
because the application is so complex, so if we can make it as simple as possible, especially at that stage. I agree with you, Shan.
We need to praise best practice
Yeah, of
when we
course.
see it as well, you know.
Absolutely. You okay with that then, Clerk?
Yes, spot on, yeah.
That's grand. Members, are you happy if we take a short comfort break before moving into our next item?
Yep.
So we're back in about 5 minutes.
Yep.
So,
Back live, yeah.
thank you, Clerk. Okay, so we're just going to restart the meeting now, and we're on to agenda item number 10, which is the departmental briefing on the building safety policy. Members, the briefing paper for this agenda item is page 502 of your pack, and I'd like to welcome the following officials to the meeting. We've got Derek Kennedy, who's Director of Residential Building Safety Division, and Gerry McKibbin, who's Principal of Residential Building Safety Division. So Derek, I think you're going to make opening remarks first, so I invite you to do that there, and then we'll go through questions.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Chair and members, for affording us this opportunity to update you on our policy development for residential building safety. Lady Chairman, none of us will ever forget the horrific images of the 14th of June in 2017. Those dreadful scenes of the Grenfell Tower enveloped in flames and black smoke, which took the lives of 72 people in the deadliest fire in the UK since 1988. Along with the terrible loss of life in its wake, it devastated families and a community. We must do everything we can to prevent this from ever happening again. The tragedy was not just a fire, it was a failure of systems, of oversight, of responsibility. Fire's impact echoed far beyond London, across the UK, devolved nations, and even across international borders, as governments began to learn from the tragedy in order to better understand its causes and how we might better regulate safety in high-rise residential buildings in order to prevent another disaster. In England, the Hacker reports reviewed the fire safety and building regulations in relation to high-rise residential buildings. Among the many findings and recommendations came a call for a universal shift in culture and made recommendations for government to deliver a more robust regulatory system. The recent Grenfell inquiry reports comprehensively outlined the circumstances and failing that led to the fire and made recommendations for regulatory and systemic reform of building safety, ranging from product testing, improved tenant management, and went as far as to make recommendations for the London Fire Brigade. Locally, an expert panel was convened by the Department of Finance to review the situation here in Northern Ireland. The panel's report, titled Improving Safety in High-Rise Residential Buildings, was published in December 2023 and largely echoes the recommendations of the Hackett Review findings. In early 2024, the Residential Building Safety Division was established in the Department for Communities with a view of improving residential building safety in Northern Ireland. Since then, our research has taken us across jurisdictions and international borders, comparing systems, studying best practice, and distilling what works. What we found is clear. A successful residential building safety system can demonstrate the following 4 principles, where accountability is not optional, competence is not assumed, it's demonstrable, risk is continually evaluated and acted upon, and enforcement is expected. Given these findings, we developed an initial set of draft policy proposals, which was used as the starting point for our citizen-centred policy co-design process with relevant stakeholder groups. Over 200 people from groups that encompassed residents of high-rise residential buildings, colleagues from the public sector, both in local government and in central government, and professionals from across industry and academia have all helped to inform and refine our proposals based on their experiences and expertise. Our initial considerations have been since refined through that co-design process and are broadly outlined as follows. Our scope will focus on high-rise residential buildings that are over 11 metres in height and more than 4 stories. Purpose-built student accommodation within those same height requirements, and residential care homes regardless of how high they are. We're proposing the establishment of key duty holders with clear responsibilities and accountability for building safety through the entire design and life of a building. The introduction of accountable person schemes for the occupies phase of a building. We're proposing to establish a series of safety gateways at key decision points in a high-rise residential building's life to ensure the continual focus of life safety throughout a building's life, from construction right through to demolition. Establishment of a new regulatory function for the occupational phase of a high-rise residential building. We propose to improve and enhance the current functions of existing building control officials across local councils for high-rise residential buildings and other non-high-rise homes. We're proposing to introduce mechanisms to include provisions that will facilitate the improvement of the system should further evidence conclude that citizen safety outcomes could further be enhanced. And finally, considerations for the implementations of appropriate fee levels and a levy to fund future remediation should it become required. Lady Chairman, we understand this is going to be challenging. We'll be working to change a culture of a complex system that has been established for over 100 years. This prevailing culture lies at the heart of every one of the 58 recommendations made by the Grenfell Inquiry Team in their Phase 2 report. However, the universal shift in culture that Dame Hackett referred to cannot simply be aspirational. It's essential. The 72 lives that were lost in Grenfell and their families and that community demand that of us all. The public sector, industry, and citizens alike must fight against complacency and embrace that need for that shift in culture so that we can avail of the fundamental right to the peaceful enjoyment of our homes. Lady Chairman and members, thank you again for your time, and we're happy to address any queries that you might have.
Thank you very much for that there, Derek. It's clear there's a lot of work has gone into this here, and it is obviously a very, very important issue, and it's great to have you here this morning to discuss it. So we'll go into a few questions here. I suppose from the North's point of view, I'd say one of the biggest issues is the fact that like the regulatory environment is so fragmented. So you've got local councils having a role, and then you've got a range of different departments within the executive having a role to play, and we saw that when it came to the buildings in Victoria Square, and how it was kind of passed around different departments. Nobody really knew who was responsible for it. So can you outline what plans the Department of Communities have to consolidate all those various regulatory controls so it's combined into one kind of central place?
I'm happy to say that we've already started. And it started with the defective premises legislation last year, which transferred that function into the Department of Communities. It has been agreed between the Minister of Finance and our Minister that in the fullness of time, once properly resourced, the building control function from the Department of Finance will also transfer into the Department of Communities, joining that very important bridge between regulations and primary legislation as well. Beyond that, in our processes, we have looked and studied very, very carefully the key policy areas that touch on building safety. And when we start to talk about safety, you can understand how far and wide it can go, and how far we should go is largely determined by its potential impact to improve safety for our citizens. So focusing on the things that can be improved, but not necessarily changing those things that are not necessarily broken. Fragmentation is a problem when it causes barriers or increases the risk to our citizens. Where it's properly focused and resources properly focused to deliver that job, we're conscious that we don't want to disrupt something that is working particularly effectively well. In the design of our policy proposals, we have worked across with our colleagues across all the NICS departments to make sure that legislation that's currently in place or regulations that are currently in place will speak and tie up to this future legislation. It's an incredibly tedious, complex, and forensic piece of work that's been done to be able to understand where everything touches that needs to be joined up and made seamless.
Just in regards to the actual legislation, when does the department anticipate bringing that there forward to the Assembly, and is it achievable that it will be delivered within even the next mandate, or what's the timeline looking like for you?
We intend to introduce the legislation very, very early in the next mandate. From when we started our policy development, we've worked closely with OLC to understand what the pipeline of legislation is and when realistically this legislation, which is very significant, could be introduced. Our intention is to introduce it. It's on time to introduce it in terms of our policy development and the subsequent consultation that the policy will go through. Is it realistic to be delivered in the next mandate? We believe so, and we believe that there is both a will and an intent to do so.
And when you talk about it being properly resourced, what do you mean by that there? What kind of funds are you talking about?
If you would clarify the question, I believe we are currently properly resourced to do that.
You're so happy with that element of it at this stage?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I have one final question, and it's about the different regimes that you mentioned there in England, Scotland, Wales and in the south. Can you confirm which one of these models that you're looking at basically most favourably, or which you think you would be leaning towards?
It would have been very, very easy to pick a model and say that one works for us. But our approach was actually to study in depth all the models across the jurisdictions to understand what works and what wasn't working particularly well. And we've designed a bespoke system that takes what we feel is the best and most appropriate elements of all those systems, from Scotland to England and Wales, and some very good work that's happened with our colleagues south of the border as well.
Even better, taking the best pieces of each of them. No, that's fine. Derek, thank you. Kelly, I'm going to move on to you for questions, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Derek. Be still my heart. You've actually said words that I love to hear, moving some of the building control from finance into communities where it's actually going to be in the one place would be very useful. Very useful. I have a few questions, and please forgive me, I'm a bit of a geek on buildings and things like that. I've gone from minibus engines now to fabrics of buildings, but you talked about residential properties over 11 metres or 4 stories, but I'm just wondering, I had met with, what were they called? Rockwool, sorry, earlier in the year, and they had talked about the need to consider other public buildings, for instance, like hospitals, and even moving into the public sector or into the private sector, hotels. Is that something that we're also considering as part of this building safety bill?
No, it's a residential building safety bill at this stage. However, into the future, as building regs moves in, those are currently considerations that could be considered in the fullness of time. I would suggest that initially focusing on preventing loss of life in people's homes should be the priority from what we've learned out of Grenfell. Being cognizant that we've learned so much more, that there's changes to building regulations that can and have already happened. Our colleagues in DOF have done an excellent job of getting in front of some things beyond that in order to comprehensively make some improvements across industry, not just within one sector.
I'm a bit disappointed hospitals aren't being included, because we've got the high rise in hospitals, and residential, we always think, yes, it's somebody's home, but with people who cannot get out of bed, and that evacuation process would be horrendous in hospitals.
Hospitals are very effectively regulated by the RQIA already, and our building control processes are there. However, we're not seeing an issue of people's lives being at risk in a hospital environment to fire.
Okay, I think maybe the cladding issue on our hospitals, cladding issue in some of our large buildings is something to be seen to be believed, I have to say. I'm interested in the accountable persons scheme. So I read with interest about the golden thread. So what we'll have is, for each of those buildings, am I right in thinking that there'll be an accountable person who will be holding that information, the golden thread, all of that collective detail? Is that to be held by that person for that building, or is that going to be accumulated into, say, the local council, that there's a register of what all of those over 11 metre buildings, residential buildings, will have?
The requirement of the accountable person is to make sure all the relevant information is available for anybody who has to make a decision based on the building. So the information is there to make good decisions on maintenance. Residents and owners, should they want to change their or do a renovation inside their flat, they have the appropriate information to make sure they're making decisions on what they're doing that won't impact on the safety of others around them. We do propose that that buildings, all high-rise residential buildings in scope, ultimately get registered with the building safety regulator, and that there's a register of those information. There'll also be a requirement that people who need the information, such as our emergency fire services, will be able to get access to that information as well.
But the bill itself isn't going to hold or require a central place where that information is held. It will have to be the accountable person.
Well, there'll be a requirement of the accountable person in each building to hold that information. We're going to suggest that it should be held digitally, as our colleagues across the water have done, in multi-format, and be able to be easily accessed.
Yeah, okay. On that accountable person, I'm just thinking about, we never want a Grenfell to happen in Northern Ireland, but going forward, is there consideration within the building safety bill as it's being considered for those accountable persons to perhaps be accountable under the Corporate Manslaughter Act?
Our thinking is absolutely in line with both that with criminal convictions for failure in their duties.
It's more of a stick than a carrot, I know, but it's that accountability is very important when you think how many people lost their lives. And finally, just then, Scotland I think they're about to remove BS 8414. Are we considering those lines as well?
Building standards are currently in the responsibility of the Department of Finance.
Okay.
I'm working very closely with my colleagues in DOF to make sure all the appropriate regulations and standards are addressed as we go through this. And there's very good collaboration and joined up there, and robust exchange of ideas as well.
I think my final one just is, you see, of all those residential buildings that are over the 11 metres, how many of them are social homes? Do we know that at the moment?
Over 43, certainly over 40, and I'm not sure if it's 42 or 43.
Okay.
Yes, and they would be in the ultimate responsibility of the NIH.
Yeah. Okay. No, thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. Alicia, go ahead, go right.
Dr. Rove, thank you, you're all very welcome. Derek, just in your presentation at the outset, you talked about that shift in culture. And is that in relation in particular to, again, to this whole idea of accountability? And then in terms of how will you ensure that you have a sufficient layer of accountability within the new regulatory regimes, and not only in terms of the accountability in itself, but that a responsibility at the present time seems to rest with council whenever it comes to enforcement and the likes of it. How confident are you that councils efficiently fulfil that role?
To start with, in terms of, there's a lot to unpack there. To start with, in terms of ensuring accountability, it's making sure we're made clear in our legislation, and as I said, by having very specific, clear responsibilities for key duty holders through the construction and the design and the construction and the occupation phase. Backed up against that is addressing competency levels within those key areas as well, something that we're working very, very closely with colleagues both across in other jurisdictions and colleagues locally here to address the competency. Because coming back to that point you made about culture shift, people simply do not aware the number of PVC doors installed in the Grenfell Tower was shocking. And people do that thought because they were gentrifying their own homes, and they didn't understand the dangers and the impact they were having on people around them by doing it. And to the exact speaking to the exact same principle, prior to that, broadband providers didn't understand that they were drilling through compartmented walls that were meant to be sealed. So that whole aspect of culture comes from a lack of understanding of awareness of impact. And that is a very, very, in order to change the culture, we need to focus on competency of all levels through the system. If I could speak to my confidence in local councils in terms of enforcement, our local council officials work very, very hard. They're very talented and very, very knowledgeable. And they do a very good job of balancing the need to bring enforcement where there's contravention. But what I think is very admirable the way our councils approach it is the way they work to resolve the issue, to mitigate the risks to people without necessarily holding up construction or holding up development. And they have a key role, and they've been continually helping to educate the sector on what best practice is and improving building standards. Going forward, we're proposing changing and improving a lot of the building control functions, and that duty and onus will continue to be on them. But I have every faith in our councils and their officials to be able to do that properly.
Thank you.
Right, Darmar, Militia. Morris, go
Thank you
ahead,
very
please.
much, Chair. Thanks very much for your presentation. You talk about a regulatory body which may or, well, hopefully will do away with the fragmentation, etc., that exists at the moment. But I'm thinking more of the future as developers and builders produce more and more materials which may be cheaper to manufacture, may to supply, etc., etc. What do you envisage testing-wise to test these new materials for? Are they fire retardant? Are they waterproof? Everything that needs to be done, going into the future, how are they going to be tested to make sure they are fit for purpose?
That's a really good point to be raised, and one that the Grenfell inquiry team raised quite specifically and was quite critical of material suppliers. Building products and construction products is a reserved matter, but I'm happy to report we are working with our colleagues in MCLG on the development of that policy. In fact, that policy is now will be turned into legislation early in the next year, and that legislation has very, very strict requirements for product testing and product development and accurate and clear information to make sure that our builders and our industry locally can both supply and construct with the best possible materials available to them.
Very much for that, Chair. Just one brief one. You alluded to the likes of broadband providers drilling through walls, etc., etc. How do you hope to educate the broadband provider, for instance, or the guy that's going to install insulation, the damage that can be done by breaking into a wall?
The analogy that I use is a broadband provider or a plumber who comes into somebody's house and knocks out, in a high-rise residential building, knocks out a block or punctures a hole through the wall in order to get to a leak without any understanding that that's a compartmented wall and creates a bridging for fire compartmentation. How we intend to do that, as I said, this is going to be very, very challenging, but we've already started the work. We're working with our colleagues in the Department of Economy and working with our colleagues in the Construction Industry Training Board, both locally and nationally, to address these competency issues and to work with existing frameworks and structures that are already in place across the industry, such as the Construction Skills Register and building safety and residential building safety being recognized as one of those skills that a broadband provider, that anybody coming into and doing this type of work should be able to demonstrate their competency to do it. This is something too that we feel we don't need to wait for legislation to do something that is practical and makes common sense, that will improve the industry as a whole. So we're going to work on many of these things concurrently with the legislation and get them in place before that, so we can help to change that culture as early as possible, because it's a significant job to do so.
And final one, Chair.
It's okay, Marsh.
And that's the question I'd like to finish off with is you envisage a regulator. How do you see that regulator working with the local councils to have a plan in place that one size fits all? It's no different in Coleraine than it is in Belfast or wherever. They're all the same standards and all the same safety concerns.
The regulator that we're proposing is for the occupation phase, and the rationale for that is that is where the biggest risk to life is, and we've learned that from the Grenfell report. But also improving the regulatory functions within the local councils and the building control functions. In terms of the consistency across the councils, there are structures in place, and the councils work very, very hard with our colleagues in DOF to maintain that consistency. In terms of the enforcement principles as well, that's something that we intend to, as we further develop this policy and get into drafting, working very, very closely with council officials to make sure everybody's aware what the requirements are and that there's a consistent application of those requirements going forward.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Kelly wants to come in and not there.
Just on that, this is why it has me a little bit confused as to why we're only looking at residential properties. If we have a regulator that can look at residential, they can look at any building. Why don't we just, in Northern Ireland, have a blanket rule that if you've over 11 metres, 4 stories, that you have to comply, whether it's residential, public building?
Because there's a variety of different aspects that need to be considered when you do that. It could be very dangerous to blanket requirements across all building types, because you end up the unintended consequences associated with restricting the use. Blanket requirements to such aspects in terms of building requirements, that's actually, in terms of the regulations, is actually part of the reason why we prefer that the local councils deal with it, because there's consistency of application. What we've learned in one sector, such as the residential, can be applied to all sectors if it's appropriate. But I would caution against just blanket requirements across all different building types, because we wouldn't understand what the unintended consequences of that is for those building uses, and that would require a different level of to be quite honest, our department currently wouldn't have the vires to do that or the expertise to do that.
That's part of my concern with the department. It's very insular. Like, we're talking housing strategy should be all housing. You know, building regulations need to be all buildings.
Building regulations do apply to all buildings, and they do that quite well.
I'm just concerned at the moment. I already know of residential buildings that have had replacement cladding gone in, and it's the wrong stuff. This couldn't come soon enough, to be honest. So thank you very much for your work. Thank you, Chair. Yeah.
Are all other members okay? Happy enough? No further questions? Oh, are you happy, Mark? Yeah. Yeah, grand. Okay, well, thank you both again for attending here this morning and for updating us on that. I'd say it's very important work that you are doing, and hopefully we'll hear from you soon. And please do keep us updated with any changes as well.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Okay, do we have any follow-up actions? Any members of anything?
Could we write to the department just to say that I appreciate the work that's ongoing for this proposed building safety bill is concentrating on residential, but should it not be? Northern Ireland's a small place. Should it not be all buildings?
Could it not include that?
Because we're saying to the councils, basically, look at residential, look at, you know, public buildings, look at businesses all in different lights.
Potentially make it more complex, yeah.
So we can, we're happy enough with that, yeah.
Are you content for us to write to the department on that? Yeah.
Yeah, just to ask what plans they have to extend the regulations across. As Kelly says, all buildings.
Okay, I'll do that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Grand. Okay, members, so our next agenda item is on the sign language bill, and we're deliberating the first two clauses. So I'm going to propose that we move into closed session, because we do have the bill clerk here in attendance to support us in our questioning here. So if we're agreed, we'll go into closed session for a while.
Yeah.
Great, thanks. Great, thank you. Okay, so you're all very welcome back to our committee meeting this morning. We just now need to agree some of the follow-up actions and requests from our deliberations of the clauses 1 and 2 on the sign language bill. So I'll go through them now, and you can keep me right. So for clause 1, there was one item of clarification we were going to seek from the Department of Communities, and that's to confirm that deaf, blind and tactile is actually included in clause 1 and then explained in the explanatory and financial memorandum. Okay. So we're going to write to the department for that there. Is the committee agreed for us to do that?
Agreed.
Great, thank you. And then clause 2. So in 2.1, first of all, we're going to ask the department's view on the feasibility of removing all from the word promote until appropriate. See if they would be content with that there, or what their views on it are, I suppose. So the Department of Communities must promote and then remove that until appropriate, yeah. Okay, until 2A. So members agreed for us to do that there?
Agreed.
Okay. And on 2.2, so initially we're going to ask the department if it's appropriate for us to add a part C and D. So for part C to include deaf adults, and then for part C to include children of deaf adults as well. D, yes, C and D, yeah. C for deaf adults and D for children of deaf adults. So are members content for us to ask the department that?
Yeah, great.
Thank you. And then in part 3, so 2.3, where it says here, children or persons under 19 years of age, to get an update from the department who we're going to look at changing that their age to 21 or 25, and really to tell them that the committee's view would be to increase it to 25, but just to get their views on it at this stage. Everyone happy with that there?
Yep.
Great, thank you. Okay, and also in clause 2, so 2.2, to add the prevention of language deprivation, and ask the department on their view. So straight after diagnosis to
Prevent language deprivation.
prevent language deprivation. So I think that was raised a number of times throughout like our meetings with different stakeholders and that was one of the big issues. So we'll ask the department if they're willing
For a view.
Yeah, for a view not there, and if they're willing to
Okay.
put in a clause in that. And then I think it's down to the last two. So clause 11, although not directly linked to, not directly under clause 1 and 2 obviously, but to change the word part to this act, so to reference in the entire deaf community, instead of those that just use BSL or ISL. It does go further than that. And then I think finally to write to the department as well to ask for their definition of promotion in regards to the entire bill.
Okay.
So are members content that we seek clarifications and views from the department on all those issues?
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Great, thank you. Okay. And members, as a follow-up action from the committee's engagement with representatives of the deaf-blind community just before recess, and based on some of the challenges that they'd outlined in terms of getting to the event here in Stormont, I propose that we write to the Minister for Infrastructure and TransLink to request that pictorial signage be included in public transport stations, and that conductors and staff receive deaf and deaf-blind awareness training. I think even in another session we had with deaf children, they talked about this as well, about you know, the use of train stations and that there.
Train stations was the big one, they said, because I mean even us as fully hearing people can sometimes find it very difficult to understand the tannoy system. So they referenced an example of standing on a platform and not knowing that their train was delayed or had moved platforms. So absolutely.
Yeah. So he's happy for us to, as a committee, to write off to the Infrastructure Minister and ask for that there.
Yeah,
Thank you. Any other follow-up actions from that closed session? Is content enough? Okay. All right, so we'll move on to agenda item 12, which is the Forward Work Programme. So a copy of the Forward Work Programme is at page 516. Let me just get this up. Are you all happy with the Forward Work Programme? Have you any comments to make? Content?
Yeah.
Okay. Right, so agenda item number 13 is any other business. Does any member have any other business? No? Great. Okay, so that brings us to agenda item 14, which is the date and time and location of the next meeting. So our next meeting will be 10 a.m. next Thursday, 13th of November in room 29. So the meeting is now adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.